And it's not only us, but the working class in general is tired of how CEOs, board members, stockholders, have been making record profits, exploiting our work.
Welcome to All That's Left, podcast from Left Voice. My name is Oden. 2023 is going to be a big year for UPS workers in the US. The 350,000 workers who are part of the Teamsters union have the biggest private sector union contract in the country. And this year, that contract is up for renegotiation. If an agreement on the new contract isn't reached in the next few months, these US workers will go on strike on August 1st. Today I'm joined by Luigi, a UPS worker in New York City who works in the warehouse in Foster, Brooklyn. Luigi is going to talk about this contract fight and what's at stake for the Teamsters, for UPS, and for the labor movement. I want to set the context here before we start our discussion. Every single day, UPS transports around 6% of the US GDP and 2% of the world's GDP. It has a 600,000 person workforce that handles almost 25 million packages per day across all kinds of sectors, both for businesses and for individuals. In 2022, it made over $11 billion in profits, and like many other companies, these revenues absolutely exploded during the pandemic. Of course, this wealth was created by UPS workers who work in grueling conditions in the warehouses. They drive the vans, which don't have air conditioning, and they work in the stores. But like at any other corporation, these workers don't get paid anywhere near the amount that they produce with their labor. So while executives at UPS, like Carol Tomei, the CEO, receive upward of $20 million per year in compensation, warehouse workers scrape by on minimum wage. So a lot's at stake for UPS workers, but this struggle is also important for the labor movement more generally. This contract fight comes amid a wave of labor organizing and union busting across the country, from Starbucks and Amazon to higher education. And it also comes just months after President Biden crushed the railroad workers' strike, showing that neither Democrats nor Republicans are on the side of the working class. So, a victory for the Teamsters at UPS could set an inspiring example for workers across the country. Because, as Luigi describes today, and as we've said on previous episodes, workers make the world run. And the strike is their most powerful weapon. At UPS, workers' strategic role in the economy could hit capitalists where it hurts, their profits. One final thing, we'd love if you could leave us a positive review on Apple Podcasts or on Spotify. Share this episode with your friends and comrades and anyone else who you think would be interested. And Left Voice is a volunteer-run publication, so if you can, we'd appreciate it if you could support us on patreon.com/leftvoice. Here is my interview with Luigi. Luigi, welcome to the podcast.
Hi, Oden. Thank you for inviting me.
Thank you for coming, even though, from what I understand it, you have to get up again in a few hours in the middle of the night to go to UPS.
Yes, had to wake up at 2 a.m. again.
Can you start by telling me a bit about the demands that the Teamsters are putting forward?
So, among the main demands, that is a call to end excessive overtime, to end the two-tier system, higher pay for part-time warehouse workers, more full-time jobs, job security for feeders and package drivers, ending the surveillance and harassment from the bosses, and a heat exhaustion and injury prevention plan to combat against the extreme weather we have been experiencing. But if we have to focus in two main demands, that were being put forward. One of them is to end the two-tier system. So to have some background, the two-tier system was undemocratically imposed by the Hoffa Junior leadership in the previous administration in the union, which under this leadership, even though most of the workers voted no to the tentative agreement, especially because of this new implementation, the union leadership decided to approve it. Anyway, that was considered a big betrayal. Since then, the two-tier system has created two categories for drivers, with a kind of new second class of drivers who do the same job as long-term drivers but are paid up to $10 less per hour. And this is also not a problem, of course, in UPS. The two-tier system, more in general, has been a strategy forced by bosses across industries in order to undermine conquest of the working class, of contracts obtained by unions, and they have hired new workers under new categories that at the end means cut wages, benefits, and rights. Even if we think recently there was the Kellogg's strike, where workers went on strike for this issue, as it is also a big topic towards the contract negotiation in the automobile industry. So definitely this affects a lot of workers. And in a similar vein, workers are demanding the end of PVDs, personal vehicle drivers, which is also another way of taking away work from drivers at a lower cost, less protections and no benefits, making the workforce less stable, more precarious, while claiming that it makes the job more flexible for workers. So this demand is very important for the drivers. Like, this will mean a big change. But then for the inside worker, the workers who are in the warehouse, the main demand is in relation to the higher wages. One of the strongest demand is to achieve to a $25 an hour as a starting wages for inside workers, who most of us, we are part-timers. We work under grueling conditions. Most of us, we wake up 2 a.m. every day to unload, sort, tag, load thousands and thousands of packages, so that then the trucks can go out through the whole country and even internationally. It is a hard work that is not well paid. Our starting wage now is $15.50, so minimum wage. And in months like this one, that is less work, we're working most of the time 3 hours and a half, and sometimes they push us to work even less. So that means that we are making around $300 per week. Who can live on that, especially here in New York City and with ongoing inflation? It is impossible. So that's why $25 an hour will mean a huge change. And ideally, we should be guaranteed also 5 hours of work. For example, something that our bosses, supervisors, does all the time is to try to, we have to handle 800 packages. Instead of doing it in a good pace, in better conditions, so that everything can be more organized and could take us 4 hours or 4 hours and a half, they will push us to do it in 3 hours and a half or 3 hours. And if it would be safe and easier to work with 3 trucks, of course they will push us to work with 4 trucks, with 5 trucks. It's all the time trying to push us to a limit to make us more productive, and that's has a toll in our bodies, in our health, and it's not fair. Like, there isn't enough work to guarantee us more hours, to work in a better pace, and the better we can do our job, the job is easier for drivers when they go out, so that the package cars can be organized and make their work easier. But the logic is all the time to push, push, push. Um, Another concern that is happening now is layoff. Like there are temporary layoff across the country, especially because we are in a contract negotiation. The company is trying to create more divisions, creating doubts, and if we use the same reasoning, uh, why we don't divide all the available work at full pay among all the workers? There is no need for people taking extra cars to be package cars to be loaded with packages, and there is no need to. There are some drivers that go out with the trucks totally full, so that is work and can be divided among everyone, so that everyone is guaranteed a job, hours, and having always working at full pay. So this is more or less the some of the main. There are more issues, but this contract fight puts forward demands to drastically improve conditions for the most precarious workers. That is us, part-time UPS worker employees in New York City, especially in the warehouse that I work. Our sector is mainly composed of black, brown, and immigrant workers, many of whom have two or more jobs to make ends meet and earn poverty wages. So, inside workers have become the majority of the UPS workforce and make up the sleeping giant within Teamsters. Now is the time for us to wake up and fight for these demands.
Is there a demand to make the wage the same across the country? Like, I'm thinking about something you mentioned to me a few days ago about how, in some parts of the country, kind of paradoxically, they're earning actually much more per hour than in New York.
So, for what I heard in some places, because they struggle to get employees that want to do this job for $15.50. In these cases, when they have problem to get enough workers, they will raise like to 18 or even $21 the hour, so that they can motivate people to come. But here in New York City and in other cities too, they take advantage that they have, you know, a much bigger population, uh, easier access to places, and with all this pandemic, economic crisis, inflation, etc. There is more poverty. There is more people that really needs a job, so they take that for their advantage and keeping lower wages. So hopefully all this brings people up to I don't know, around $25, and we are all in the same number.
I want to dive a little bit deeper into the political context of the Teamster and UPS contract fight. So, speaking of labor and UPS, yesterday President Biden tweeted, "I make no apologies for being the most pro union president in American history." And Biden has always painted himself this way, and especially during the campaign when he was running against Donald Trump, there was this idea that the Biden administration would be the most pro worker administration in history. He was going to be the new FDR when it came to labor and in a lot of other ways. And so I think I have a suspicion about how you're going to answer this question, but I want to ask you, is this the most pro union US administration imaginable? And can you also talk a little bit more generally about like the the overall political climate right now around unions and around this struggle.
You know, Biden is running again as a candidate for the next presidential elections, and he's already coming again with the same story about him being a pro union guy, etc. But his administration already showed, more in general, uh, how he hasn't benefit at all to the working class, especially with inflation. It has been very hard to make ends meet, pay rent, and a lot of his promises that could have improved some aspects of the workers' daily life never happened. Instead, there are billions of dollars for war, but not for healthcare or education, housing, and many important things that uh, you know would have improved workers' life beyond the workplace. At some point, there was a whole thing around the PRO Act, and that never happened, even though itself it was a legislation that falls way short of the labor rights that workers need. That never happened. He had a meeting with Chris Small in person, but that was just a photo op. The the reality of Amazon workers hasn't changed, and all the effort to fight back this corporation are coming from below, from workers and organizers with very little resources. And Amazon is not the only example. You have workers from many corporations trying to unionize their workplace, and they are facing a lot of union busting. This corporation has almost unlimited resources, and most of the laws are on their side. And we have to think that getting a union representation is just one first basic step. But I would say that probably one of the most clear examples was his, but also the Democrats more in general, when they intervened to undemocratically enforce a contract on the railroad workers, and this also includes the more progressive sectors of the Democratic Party, like AOC and Jamal Bowman. Railroad workers were fighting for a new contract to improve a lot of the working conditions, not just sick days, and against the threat of a strike, the Democratic Party didn't hesitate to side with the railroad corporations that we have seen, like soon after all this happened, how uh, they are also responsible of all these accidents, problems with the trains, including uh, ecological chaos, like we're seeing in East Palestine. And, and at the same time, we have to, you know, be aware that UPS makes donations to the Democratic Party, like including Chuck Schumer. So we definitely have not to have illusions on these politicians. Like you can't be with the bosses and the workers at the same time. You have to take side. And the money is coming from the corporation, so definitely they have someone to answer to. And in the case of the railroad workers, they use the Railway Labor Act. In the case of UPS, that doesn't apply to us, but definitely they can find alternative methods to prevent or to limit the strike, like police presence, allowing scabs to enter to work. They can repress us, persuade us of accepting uh, contracts, tentative agreements that are not good. So we have to know that we have to be ready for a tough fight, and the Democrats will definitely not be in our side. And fights are not easy. Many corporations have shown a strong resistance to give away concessions. The miners' strike in Alabama, after you know historical and super long struggle, they were defeated. Amazon and Starbucks are being strong union busters. They are refusing to negotiate the contract. Tech companies are now firing thousands of workers. So, these bosses are really not trying to give nothing away. And we're in a moment where the inflation is still high. There has been a recent crisis among banks. That is this prospect of at least a mild recession. So companies are not going to easily give away profits, despite their billionaire profits, record profits, and all the money that have been accumulating all this time. Um, and why all these are like, you know, things that doesn't go in favor of our movement. On a positive note, there has been a very auspicious broad support to unions. Like some statistics say that 70% of the US population support unions. That is the whole new generation that is taking the lead to fight for unions in their workplaces. And while we are still very far from more radical moments of US history, there has been an increase in strike, union drives, and all this is combined with an ideological change, with lessons that people, workers, have been taking after going through the hardest time of the COVID pandemic, where bosses didn't hesitate to make us work in unsafe conditions and putting at risk uh, our and our families' lives. So the fact, including in UPS, that we went from essential to disposable, from heroes to zeros, it has been a major lesson for the working class.
Yeah, totally. I mean, you mentioned Amazon and Starbucks, which were two really notable companies last year and right now for their unionization. Like Starbucks in particular saw a really huge wave of stores unionizing. But then there's also been this huge wave of academic organizing, especially among graduate students and young workers, precarious academic workers. So, yeah, it's an interesting time in terms of the way that Democrats and Republicans are cracking down on labor, like with the Railway Act and things like that, and how companies are cutting a lot of jobs and things like that. But also, I feel like, yeah, like you said, there is of this very auspicious time in a sense in terms of union support. Earlier, you laid out the Teamster demands, like getting rid of the two-tier system and things like that. But the reason we're talking about this isn't just because we care about these sort of like bread and butter kind of demands that specifically only apply to UPS workers. Why would you say that we should be keeping an eye on this contract fight? Why is it so significant?
So I would say that now, after many years of concessionary contracts imposed by the Hoffa Junior leadership, that was the previous leadership of the Teamsters union, now Teamsters are gearing up for a major fight back, making a lot of promises, including you have the president Sean O'Brien saying that we're gonna go on a strike if a good contract is not agreed on our first, we are striking. So at least the change in the rhetoric, how this speech is being listened by 300,000 workers at national level. So that creates a different context and a different atmosphere to deal with. And if we go on a strike, this will be the first national UPS strike since 1997, and by far the largest US labor action in decades. Um, so, coming back to your question, this contract negotiation and the possible strike can be a turning point, or at least a boost for the workers' struggle to come. A victory against the two-tier system for high wages can set the tone, for example, for Amazon workers that they're trying to have a contract, to non-union workplaces like FedEx I know those workers don't have a union. Yeah, I think all many sectors can get inspiration from all these struggles, and having over 300,000 workers going on strike nationwide would be a huge impact. And Democrats intervened to divert the regular strike for the impact that it could have had in the economy. And this strike, too, has that potential that can create, an important disruption of the economy, not only affecting UPS but affecting broader businesses. So that shows how the strike is one of our most powerful tools, is what allow us to affect our bosses' profits and put capitalists very nervous. The 16 days UPS strike in 1997 made UPS lose 168 millions in profit, and according to recent research made by Chris Bonner and Radish, this possible strike can make UPS lose 3.2 billions on profit in 16 days. So from 500 billions, 500 millions to 3.2 billions. It's like it is a lot on at stake. And if this goes longer and the strike becomes very tough, if we reach to, let's say, whole month on a strike, they will lose 6.2 billion. That's half of the profit that they got this year. So the strike will also affect the distribution by UPS. UPS, I think they distribute 20 million packages per day. And that is some work that can be given to other companies. Maybe scabs are brought up. Maybe some distribution centers. The strike is not that strong, but there is no way that they can have a, a whole infrastructure to um, work with 20 million of packages per day as they are doing now. And a lot of them are related to important businesses, factories, hospitals. UPS handles an estimated 6% of the GDP. UPS has been having billions in profits for years and years, like from an average of 7.5 billions from 22 to 2020. Then during the pandemic, they jumped to over 13 billions. And in this period, part-timers like me, we have been losing non-stop against inflation, while the Carol Tomé, who is the UPS CEO, made over 27 million dollars if you count salary, bonus, stock options, and other things. So like the difference is crazy. It's huge. So and it's not only us, but the working class in general is tired of how CEOs, board members, stockholders, have been making record profits, exploiting our work.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really worth emphasizing how incredibly important UPS is. And this is something you mentioned earlier was the critical role that UPS plays both domestically and internationally. And it made me think of this quote that we published once by two writers and academics, Jake Ali Mohammed Wilson and Emmanuel Ness. And in a forward to a book that they edited, which is called Choke Points Logistic Workers Disrupting the Global Supply Chain, they wrote, quote, logistics workers are uniquely positioned in the global capitalist system. Their places of work are also in the world's choke points, critical nodes in the global capitalist supply chain, which, if organized by workers and labor, provide a key challenge to capitalism's reliance on the smooth circulation of capital. In other words, logistics remains a crucial site for increasing working class power today. Amen.
Yeah, that's a great quote.
So, From my understanding, the campaign for new contracts started recently, just on April 16th, and the strike would begin on August 1st. Can you talk more a little bit about what the plan is toward the possible strike and what the situation is right now?
Um, so far, the negotiation has been stalled, like there hasn't been so much movement. And the president of the union is trying to get the company to negotiate first the local agreements. Because you have the master uh, contract for the whole country, but then each local or different cities, they have their own supplementals. So the union is saying, until we don't advance with the supplemental first, we are not going to discuss nothing from the national one. So things so far are blocked there. Um, and in general, UPS hasn't shown any intention of moving forward with the union demands. And what they are saying is, if we give something, you need to give us something. And the things that they are trying to get is how to make our workforce more uh, flexible so that they can change when we clock in, when we clock out, how they can hire all these people who are not in the union, like trying to make ways to bring more flexibility and uh, yeah, and avoiding many of our rights benefits. In our case, here in New York City, the union leadership and the local 804 have said multiple times that if our demands, especially about the two-tier system and higher wages for warehouse workers, are not met by July 31st, the next day we are going on a strike. Um, but it's not that that happens automatically. There has to be a lot of preparation for that moment, and the ones who ultimately should decide if to go on strike or not, what demands to prioritize, what tactics to put forward, how to prepare a strong strike, strong picket lines, etc., is the rank and file. So I think in the next period, it's really, really important to increase the membership involvement, having more parking lot meetings where rank and file can express their opinion, have social gatherings to build stronger connections, organize actions, rally, etc. Everything that can help to empower the rank and file, to make them agent of their own struggle, and also to include the community as an important ally because the company will rely on the state and the police, Democrats, and many of their friends. We should definitely work together with our friends. So, in that sense, I hope that people who are listening to this will share it, uh, join our actions, support our struggle, and as I mentioned before, this will also be important for the unions and workers movement in general.
Luigi, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
No, thanks you for inviting me, and we still have 3 months towards the end of the negotiation and the possible strike, so probably we will talk again.
Definitely. I will stay updated on this and I will, yeah, thank you.
Yeah, thanks to you.
Follow us on Facebook at facebook.com/leftvoice.org, on Instagram at left_voice, and on Twitter at left_voice. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider leaving us a review on Apple Podcasts and share the show with your friends, your family, coworkers, classmates, comrades, and anyone else who you want to radicalize. And finally, Left Voice is an independent, revolutionary socialist publication, which means that we completely rely on the support of our members and our sympathizers. So that we can continue to bring you more episodes of All That's Left, please subscribe to our Patreon at patreon.com/leftvoice. We're really excited about this project, and we hope that you'll join us on this journey.